We are chapter 12. I'm not sure if you can believe it that we are this far along. I think these are my last recordings for the semester 12, 13, 14. Maybe I've got one more after that. Um, and we've made it. So congratulations. You're almost there and you'll get a nice break. But here are our learning objectives for counseling adults. Understanding the transition model and ways it can be used in counseling adults, the four developmental stages of adulthood: emerging adulthood, early adulthood, middle, and later. There are different transitions that occur in each one of those stages. It's important that you understand what those are to normalize them for your client, understand what issues could be problematic in the different stages of adulthood. Discuss ways to combat ageism and understand gender-aware counseling and its application to women and men, which is timely because we just talked about feminist counseling. This goes nicely with that lecture. So the definitions of the different transitions in adulthood are as follows. So anticipated transitions, those are things that we just think normatively would occur, that occur in a predictable sequence. That is, of course, not taking in the context of other environmental factors, but things like leaving the home and starting a job, they're anticipated, right, in most of our lives. You kind of think that that would be coming. But then there are unanticipated things we don't expect that are derailing at times, like getting fired or having some kind of sickness or divorce, losing a parent or child. Then there are these non-events. These are things that we expect to happen in our life, but they may not occur. An example of that might be trying a couple trying to have kids and not being able to. And the perspective is your client's appraisal of that transition. So the perspective could be very positive about some of these things, like maybe they were let go from their job, but they are happy about it and they found a new lease on life. And the context, you always want to consider the context. So what are the factors, these environmental factors with gender, the culture, their socioeconomic level, that affect the transition in their life. One of the examples is um, 1930s and 40s, people were affected by the Great Depression. And right now, if you think about it, people are being affected by COVID-19. So it's really interesting to think about the impact that the context right now has changed for us. And that is what we would say is unanticipated. Um, that we didn't anticipate that happening. What are people's different perspectives about that issue? So let's talk about emerging adulthood first. Oops, sorry. In the actual transition model, using these terms, it has three parts: approaching transition, so identifying the types of transitions and the transition process itself; taking stock of coping resources, so identifying assets and liabilities as they apply to the situation, support systems, self, and strategies for coping, also known as the four S's. The four S's are the situation, the self, the support, and the strategy. The situation is what is happening. Does the transition come at a time that your client is having a lot of stressors? The self variable: to whom is the transition happening? Each person is different, and some people can handle things a lot better than others. Their coping mechanisms, they have a higher stress tolerance. People are different. I mean, people could be very positive or very negative about it. They also, what's the support? What help is available? What systems are in place? Is the individual getting what they need as they move through that transition? And the strategies. How does the person typically cope? What works? That's a solution-focused question. And also maybe reality therapy. Coping represents the ways people respond to life strains and stressors. So thinking about what coping mechanisms do they have or what coping mechanisms can you assist them with. So you approach it, then you take stock of the coping through the four S's. Then you take charge, help them to develop resources and coping mechanisms to move toward a positive outcome through this transition in their life. Okay, so as you talk about counseling different populations, this is probably my favorite. I love counseling adults. Um, I love actually counseling emerging adults as well. But definitely, if I counsel an emerging adult, which is someone who is in between adolescence and adulthood. So, this is someone who is becoming a young adult, but I like this category because between 18 and 24, your brain is still growing. And this is in your text, but it's proven. In the prefrontal cortex, that's responsible for logic and rational thinking and reasoning skills, is not fully formed until after 24. And there's this new category of adolescent, but you're not quite an adolescent. Okay, you're not a teenager, but you kind of still act like one. And it's very interesting. The research on drug court, and I may have shared this in one of the many PowerPoints I've done like this, but the research does demonstrate the efficacy of substance abuse treatment to be much higher after age 24. And that is because they can make a better decision for themselves after that age. So no, you don't, that's just an example, but if you think about your own life, this is an interesting stage, and it has emerged historically speaking. You were an adult when you were 18. We had an industrial economy. You went right to work. We didn't have this higher education where you went to grad school and doc programs, and that's becoming more of the norm that we're continuing to stay in school for longer and learn more. Um, Women also have opportunities, and also people are like habitating or putting off marriage and having children until later. So we kind of have this new stage to me of emerging adulthood, and it's characterized by 5 features, and they're listed below. Yeah, this is just like Erickson said. This is that area where you're trying to find yourself. Who am I really? And that used to come earlier, but now, you know, who am I? Where do I fit in the world? There's a lot of instability. You might be finishing college or starting your career, don't have your finances in order. You have to be pretty self-focused, and you're not as self-focused as an adolescent, but you're definitely more self-focused um, than you would as an older adult. You feel very in between, like you still kind of want to be a kid and an adolescent, just kind of like my going into middle school, my 10-year-old. It's similar to that where she's still in 5th grade, wanting sometimes to play with dolls or be, and having that childlike mentality, and then other times wanting to be bigger and more of a middle schooler and things. And like today, she didn't want to wear her costume. There was a book character day. It's the only day. It's only the first time she didn't want to wear a costume to school, and she's dressing up for Halloween. She's Alice in Wonderland, but she's going to be fine with that, but amongst her peers. And I didn't push it, of course, because I am aware of the fact that she is in that transition. So similarly, in this emerging adulthood, where you still may like, oh gosh, I wish I was back in college and just having fun and no responsibilities, but then really craving too to have, your own place and being able to do your own thing and maybe start a family or go into a partnership. The sky is the limit and the possibilities are endless. So that, but these are things, if you're counseling an emerging adult, that these are the things that you would need to know and you would need to understand that. If you looked at a 24-year-old that just came in for counseling with you and you didn't understand that, you could go very wrong in help in understanding where they are in their life transition stage. I love counseling this stage. And like I've already said, it's really, really important that you're knowledgeable about this stage of life and that you understand what you can normalize for what this individual is going through and educate them about stages. I mean, it doesn't have to be a secret, but also be super aware of the certain common clinical issues that can occur during this stage. Um, there are eating disorders, a lot of anxiety and depression, substance abuse, not able to control emotion, and that is in large part due to the brain, and also so many things coming out of the home and starting a life, and perhaps there's trauma, perhaps there's a lack of awareness, self-awareness, and education about emotions. And also, schizophrenia would start to come out, symptoms around this age, around about 26. 24 to 26, you would really want to rule that out if something was going on. So we want to call emerging adulthood versus an early. Early is after our brain is on its grown up, finished growing, not finished, but Prefrontal is more secure. And we move into what we call early adulthood, 25 to 40 years, which is terrible for me because I'm 42, which means I am now out of early adulthood into middle adulthood. But I really feel like I'm still an adolescent. Sorry. This is that time in your life where you are perhaps finding a partner, finding someone to spend the rest of your life with, finding meaningful relationships in a partnership, um, or other friends. Let's see. Or becoming isolated. So that's that Erikson crisis. We are living longer, so it's important to note that middle adulthood is now later than it was before because we are living longer. So the expected life is like 79 point something, I think, now for women and something else for men. I think that's actually in your text. Let me see. 79 years. But it is different for women because women do live longer than men. And so single adults, there are a lot of single adults. 50% of all Americans over the age of 18 are single. The median age for first marriage is 27 for females and 29 for males, unless you live here in LaGrange, which for some reason that number seems far lower to me. Like people get out of college here or not out of college, and they seem to get married at like 4, 3. I don't know, too early, in my opinion. Your brain's not done growing. Don't do that. Try to wait if you can until your brain's done growing. That's probably a good choice. But no judgment if you did marry that early. I got married at 26. So, all right. And then people cohabitate in this age range. So sometimes people have partnerships or they may have a sexual relationship or some other arrangement. It is an alternative to marriage. Mixed reports regarding the benefits of cohabitation in marriage. Um, in general, research suggests that cohabitation either leads to no differences or has a negative effect on marital satisfaction. And then we've got the newly married folks. An egalitarian marriage is best, and couples have to work to figure that out, learn how to share everything. And the healthiest marriages that they thrive when those adults actually feel like the other one is meeting their needs and they're both equal partners in that marriage. Children do benefit when you have two parents who are legally and emotionally dedicated to them in a family unit. And as we know, the newness of the marriage or the relationship wears off in the first 2 years, and it's one of the more likely times for couples to divorce. That honeymoon stage is over. We talked about that in class, I think, at some point in another class. Who knows? It all runs together at this point, doesn't it? And gay and lesbian couples are very similar to heterosexual couples in several ways: committed, faithful, supportive. Um, Now married. Problems associated with communication, finance, and abuse may arise, but it's similar to what occurs in heterosexual relationships. Overall, similar satisfaction. Um, Same-sex couples with children may be more likely than their married heterosexual counterparts to exhibit an equal division in household labor. Nice. So they have an even happier chance when they have equitable distribution of labor. Parents with young children. So we know this is physically, psychologically, and interpersonally demanding on the couple. There are many factors that can influence that. And how the parents adapt to this really is mediated by certain factors, such as do they have a stable place to live? How is their marital relationship? What are their finances? What's their stress level? How about childcare? How much is that going to cost for them to put the children in daycare? It's a lot. I don't have to do that anymore, but it's a lot. It can be very unbalanced, especially when a newborn enters the family. There can be a lot of different roles being played at one time by the mom. So it can be really tough. So what do you do if you have a young adult for counseling? There's premarital education and counseling, psycho ed about what to expect during early adulthood. Um, Groups for people to cope with those unanticipated transitions like divorce, and then helping explore their family patterns and families of origin and how that might interact with um, the partner in their life is something that could be helpful in counseling young adults. In middle adulthood, this is 40. Yes, thank you. 60, 65. I am now a middle adult. You hear me talk about this in lifespan development a lot because I use myself as an example. But entire period can be conceptualized as midlife transition. Thank you. We have physical changes such as wrinkles, graying hair, balding, and then things to know. Drops in hormone level like perimenopausal and menopausal women, you need to know about those things. And in lifespan development, we go into those details that the health and wellness aspects of our clients are really important aspects of what we do in the counseling room. You may have thought when you came in you're just going to use theory, but you're not. You're going to use all of these things when you counsel. In lifespan development, it is really helpful in identifying these types of issues, because what if your client comes in and they're perimenopausal, and that is why they're depressed and anxious? And if you just go forward with your theoretical orientation and don't talk about those kinds of things in your intake and discussions throughout, then you may miss the one thing that's causing the issue. Your responsibility to figure all that out. Maybe I know that really lessens your anxiety. This is generativity versus stagnation. Maybe this is why I work so hard, because I want to be a generativity. That was not right. But find ways to give back and guide, generating good stuff, taking care of others, adding back to society, having meaningful work. And we do have such meaningful work. We're so blessed to have this career. Honestly, I love what I do. But stagnant, the opposite is we don't want to be this, is detached and narcissistic and self-centered, being completely for yourself and not attending to anything else in life, and being detached. So if you have a client coming in this season of life, you might be able to tell very quickly where they are in the spectrum between generativity and stagnation. It's a good review of Erickson's stages of development for you, I think. So there are issues that come up in this as well, such as parenting. There can be some role strains on dual income families, like especially those who are in low SES. There can be issues with divorce, very common in this first 5 to 10 years of marriage, and then can be problematic in this stage. Also, an income drop. Children can return home during this stage because of the boomerang generation, especially during COVID. We had everybody coming home. I mean, of course, my kids were home, but young adults, you guys may have gone home and had to stay home, and you had maybe not been at home for a long time, some of you. So you think about those kind of factors that could be problematic, and divorce rates are skyrocketing. Divorce leads to an income drop for women. Really difficult. Caring for aging parents could start here. This is where we talk about the sandwich generation, midlifers who are caring for children under the age of 18, as well as for aging parents. So this is a huge strain, can be a financial strain, and caregiving can be quite stressful for this generation. My generation is kind of where I am right now. And then we have Levinson's Season of Life. Of course, Levinson's is based on, this research is based on interviews with middle-aged men. And females were not included in the original study, but he did later report that stages and transitions associated with midlife were applicable to women as well as men. Thank you, Levinson. He suggests that midlife begins with this transition, age 40 to 45, followed by life structure. The structure is reevaluated between the ages of 50 and 55 and ends in a culminating life structure, age 55 to 60. You evaluate your life in regard to goals, success, and failures during that. Midlife relationships, I've already kind of started covering. Sandwich generation, boomerang, etc. Implications is that you need to know about these things and use that 4S model that we talked about in the beginning, help to assess these life transitions. Later adulthood is 65 and older, In 2014, 46.2 million Americans, or 14.5% of the population, were 65 or older. By 2030, there will be 70 million people. So if you don't think you're going to be counseling older adults, you've got another thing coming. I have gotten so many calls lately for Medicare. We don't take Medicare yet. We're advocating for that. But we need to take it because these people are in a mess and they can't get the help they need because we can't take Medicare. What a mess. So we're gonna, by the time you get out of school, we'll have that fixed, I bet. People are living longer. We got more stages. I bet before we get through this, no, look at this. 85 is old. Gosh, terrible. At least I'm not young old yet. Young old, and old. Yeah, nice. Okay. Old. I'm old. Okay. Hopefully you guys are really enjoying these recorded lectures. Later, adulthood developmental issues. This is Erickson's ego integrity versus despair. You're feeling good about yourself. You have lived a good life and you are continuing to live a good life and you are giving back, or you're not and you're in despair. And when the despair clients come in, it's tough. There's a lot of negativity. Gerotranscendence is this period when older adults begin to withdraw from their material world and focus on spiritual. They turn more inward and spend a lot of time on self-reflection. If they are in ego integrity, they don't do that so much if they're in despair and start to review their life. They want to know if they have that ego integrity, the satisfaction, feeling accepting of the life that they have led. And we have theory of selective optimization with compensation. One more thing before I start talking about the theory of selective optimization with compensation. Let's talk about gerotranscendence one more time. It is kind of thought of as perhaps that ninth stage of development, that inward self-reflection. I just wanted to make sure I reference that it could be the ninth stage. As we move into this next area, and this theory really applies to older adults who are going through this stage. And it goes through a series of three of those stages. And selection is choosing those goals and activities that are really meaningful and, that are a part of generativity, trying to optimize every opportunity to effect the most positive change, and compensation to counteract loss in a way that makes it possible to reach outcomes. It's a way to navigate kind of end of life issues or that last stage of being an older adult. And as a counselor, you would want to help that client explore goals that would be meaningful to them in family, leisure, and work. I think we could all agree that at some point in all of our lives, we will go through adverse events and we'll go through adversity. And it really is the way that you handle that in your earlier life that predicts how you will handle that in later life, which is all the more reason for us to help clients at all stages of life, but particularly thinking about the long term, because if people can build resilience, which we can create and help people to be resilient, and we know biologically that we can do that. I took a webinar today on biofeedback, and I'm getting trained in neurofeedback, and we know we can change brainwaves. We know we can change heart rate variability, and we know that increases resiliency and increases your stress tolerance. So I think you could do that at any age, and it's super important for you to know that you have the ability to do that with your clients. And I really love the study of resilience. I love focusing on the positive, focusing on the strong. We're so resilient, and you can build resiliency. It's just a way that people adapt in a more positive way. It's they're able to really bounce back quite quickly, like a rubber band you stretch really tight, and it just bounces back really quick. And the way that what factors, great, sorry, I got interrupted by my child. The factors that contribute to resiliency are things like personality. If you think about the NEO5 personality test, we learned that in earlier chapters. There are certain personality traits that make you more resilient. They are openness to change, agreeableness, and extroversion, having a sense of humor, being optimistic, looking at the glass half full instead of half empty, being able to problem solve and have coping mechanisms. Actually, having some type of spirituality or religiosity is also an indicator of resilience. contributes to resiliency and having a big support system from family, friends, and community, and also cultural factors. People who are more resilient have a lot more positive outcomes in their older age. And of course, there is the good old ageism. This is prejudice of older people, and there's a lot of ways it's expressed: elder speak, discrimination, and abuse. And then I guess with more we could say about ageism, and just kind of know those different ways of discrimination. Think about your own bias with elderly, and maybe not even using that term elderly. Instead of older adults, just changing the way that you think and talk about it, and that can help to change people. All right, and then we're almost done. We've got 4 slides left. Into gender aware counseling. I'm not entirely sure where I left off on this one. I had to abruptly stop. So, of course, at this stage in our lives in 2020, we recognize the way that gender roles are socially constructed. Realize how much of stereotypes and social pressures influence the way that we look at gender roles. And we know that gender roles are changing. We know that gender development is influenced by many factors: biology, cognition, culture, and socialization. And to know the difference between socially constructed roles and biological sex, which is related to chromosomes. Also, making sure that you understand where we are with this at this point. Our roles are changing, men and women's roles are changing, women are working, etc. Men are staying home with the children now and more often. So these are things that we need to be aware of in counseling. Now, counseling women have multiple roles, and you need to understand their identity, emphasizing the importance of self-care, and those holistic approaches that I've been mentioning the entire time that we have been talking since the semester started. And that is a conceptual process by a psychosocial model that should be applied to all cases. Physical, spiritual, relational, emotional wellness should be assessed. We talked about the health aspect. It could be menopause, it could be thyroid. Really important for you to look at every part, especially with women. About that. Women, unfortunately, really overvalue approval of others. And so I often joke with my clients and say, your family's not going to like me when you get finished with me, because you are going to say no all the time and not care. And it is true. It's fun to watch, but it's also probably alarming for their loved ones when we don't start to care as much of what other people think, and not looking for that to gain validity and how we feel about ourselves. Women earn 77% of what men earn in similar occupations. 57% of women are in the workforce, but women outlive men by 5 years. Elderly women are less likely to commit suicide. Just some of the things that are noteworthy in the chapter that I would understand about counseling women. And this is that same thing. We're moving them from a position of depending on others for approval to where they are respecting their own self-eval. They are autonomous. They feel good about themselves because of who they are. And they don't look to others to get that validity, that validation. So that's really empowering. It's about empowering them, making sure they understand the oppression that women have gone through. And we brought up, particularly layered cases for women who are people of color or other marginalized populations, sexual orientation, thinking about not just white women, but all the different types of women that would come in and all the layers of what they're bringing with them. So thinking about that for your case, much like we talked about, I think the case of Alma in class, and I think that may have been in when we talked about feminist therapy. But this goes nicely with this to talk about it. To think about relationships. She's Dominican. She identifies as lesbian. And there may have been one more thing. And she's a woman. She's female. So those 3 factors of the different layers of oppression that she had experienced in her life, and making sure that you are understanding of that and meeting the client where they are. Also, so those are depending on their culture, being careful with that autonomy, but just empowering them to know they are awesome and that they do have more on them than men do, honestly. So, negative body image is a big issue in counseling on all women, eating disorders, and just the way that they conceptualize themselves. And fun fact, the next slide is what we were talking about in class, the feminist therapy. Cool, huh? So we've got the basic tenets: personal, political, relationship between counselor and client, egalitarian, and women's experiences have priority. There are three strategies that make multicultural feminist therapy unique: the gender role analysis, which we talked about in class, and the power analysis we also discussed. How they use power and how it's used on them. We talked about assertiveness training and cultural analysis, examining the multiple identities, so going into their own culture. And I love doing that work with people. It's so healing for them, and doing some ancestral historical trauma work. It's just been the highlight of my career as of late. Really, really enjoyed that. Now, we would be remiss if we did not talk about counseling men. I have a large caseload of men at this point. I'm enjoying them so much. I'm so glad that they are coming in more. They are coming in more. We have several males in the program. It's just awesome. I know I'm on the Auburn Advisory Board, and there are no men. I think they have one male in the whole, all of the counseling program. I think they have five. So I was excited because we have several. So go us. That's awesome. I'm so glad we have men in the field. But we will have more and more men coming in, thankfully, because stigma is reduced. And you can't push men too much. You got to really validate their feelings and have a plan. They got to know exactly what's going on. They need to know that this is going to have an outcome. Evidence-based therapy is super, super good for men because they kind of come in skeptical, and it's hard for them to come anyway. So when they come in, you better have some kind of good plan for them. Then you can show them the evidence, especially more really, really left. Men are more left brain anyway, but just really high functioning men who are highly intelligent. You better have something ready for them. You can talk about normal issues with men and slowly encourage the expression of feeling, explore underlying issues and understanding ways of the new world. And we can use using some feminist therapy into this to encourage them and should demonstrate in a loving, kind way what, on the converse side, what it might be like. And so it's an excellent, excellent time to talk about counseling men. And it is a little bit different than counseling women. You wouldn't, and men are highly depressed and very anxious, especially right now. And I'm seeing a lot of depression, and it does present a little bit differently. They're much more likely to take their life. Very important. And part of that, I do believe, is because they do restrict their emotions so much. Because that's what they've been taught. Society's taught men that, we talked about this in class, that don't cry, toughen up. Well, they still feel the same way we do. They're still hurt. They're still feeling vulnerable. They still feel shame. Shame's universal. We all feel shame. Everybody feels shame. Brene Brown, she's a rock star. So honestly, I do think that contributes to anger and depression because you got us going somewhere. We know when we stuff our feelings, it makes us sick in our bodies and in our minds. I am finally done. I hope y'all. I'm finishing this on Halloween, so happy Halloween, everybody. Hope y'all have a wonderful night. I hope y'all get to have a little bit of fun.